It's interesting that he just said we need to find opportunity to minister as the body of Christ, and that's actually what I'm going to be talking about today. So I apologize in advance. I was trying to find some Kleenex because I am just fighting some kind of cold. So if you happen to know where Kleenex is in the room, I may need some. So I want to talk today about completing the work. Looking at the ministry of Jesus and those that he healed, because he really did start his ministry with a lot of healing and miracles. And it's pretty fascinating to see all the different people that he touched and he healed. But there's always been something that stuck out to me as a little odd because, of course, I'm a contextual person, so I like to see the full picture. But has anybody other than me thought, why did he ask the lame man or many others to take up his bed and walk? Why he would ask them to do, maybe it's just me, but I thought, I don't really know exactly what the relevance here is. But why before they even gotten up, thank you, but why they were even healed, he had already given them something to do. He had already instructed them to do something. And so you and I both know that the Lord is not, he doesn't do it by accident, right? Like this is purposeful. This is direct and intentional. So this is not something that is just like, oh, I just happened to be having a conversation with this person. So I wanted to look at several examples today of Jesus transforming people's lives and the instructions he gives them. So I'm going to start with blind Bartimaeus. In Mark 10:50 through 52, and he, casting away his garment, rose and came to Jesus. And Jesus answered and said unto him, What wilt thou that I should do unto thee? The blind man said unto him, Lord, that I might receive my sight. And Jesus said unto him, Go thy way, thy faith hath made thee whole. And immediately he received his sight and followed Jesus in the way. So first I want to just talk about, can you imagine being blind and begging, and within a moment, you're a completely different person? So this isn't just a healing of blindness. His whole life was completely transformed. Right. So do you think the blind man knew what to do or where to go? When he says, go thy way, he'd never seen where he's going. He said, somebody lead him, somebody direct him. So no, Jesus didn't think he knew exactly where to go, but Jesus, once he told him to go on your way, he just started following Jesus because it sounded like a good plan. I don't really know where I'm going, and I don't have a plan. So I think that's a very interesting dialogue here, that he didn't just heal him, he got him moving. Right. So let's talk about whenever they tear the roof off to let down the man with the palsy. So Luke 5:18 and 19 and 24 and 25. And behold, men brought in a bed a man which was taken with a palsy, and they sought means to bring him in and to lay him before him. And when they could not find by what way they might bring him in because of the multitude, they went upon the housetop. You talk about some creative folks. Yeah. And let him down through the tiling with his couch into the midst before Jesus. And that ye may know, I'm skipping down to 24, that ye may know that the Son of Man hath power on earth to forgive sins. He said unto the sick of the palsy, I say unto thee, arise, and take up thy couch, and go into thine house. And immediately he rose before them, and took up wherein he lay, and departed to his own house, glorifying God. This man had friends that were willing to go to drastic measures to get him at the feet of Jesus. They were expecting a miracle. You don't just tear off the roof and do all these things without thinking, well, hope this works. No, their expectation was very high. But he gives him several instructions, and he says, arise, take up thy couch, and go into thine house. That was on purpose. Anybody here 38 years old? You are. Awesome. Anybody been married for 38 years? It's a long time. I'm not saying he's old. That's not what I'm saying. But the next miracle I want to talk about is the man at the pool of Bethesda. They note in Scripture that he had been lame, or in this case is what they say, for 38 years. He wasn't at the corner of the city, a center of town, begging, from my understanding, but instead he was in a designated place that he thought could heal him. This was a person that had moved towards the only thing he knew, or he thought could change his situation, right? He'd parked out someplace that he thought, a miracle could take place. This wasn't just a lazy-about person. This was somebody that made some decisions based on the only evidence he had. He was a desperate guy. So John 5:5-8, and a certain man was there, which had an infirmity 38 years. When Jesus saw him lie, and knew that he had been now a long time in this case, he saith unto him, Wilt thou be made whole? The impotent man, which means powerless, a powerless man, answered him, Sir, I have no man, when the water is troubled, to put me into the pool. But while I am coming, another steppeth down before me. And Jesus said unto him, Rise, take up thy bed, and walk. I've heard it many times before that the lame man gave an excuse to Jesus when he asked if he would be made whole. I could be wrong, but of the others, he was the only one that was seeking out to find a solution to his problem before he found Jesus. He had done something. While we can judge his answer to Jesus as one of an excuse, I think it was one of an explanation. I'm trying. I've done all I know to do, and I still can't get there. He could be at home, like the man with the palsy, being waited on and being independent, or begging on the street corner like a blind man, but instead, he had camped out at a place that inspired hope. How many of us have been there or know somebody that's there? Interestingly, when you look up the word lame, it describes in Greek as halt. He was literally stuck. No matter how he tried or which way he had chose, he couldn't move forward. And so I always find that fascinating that, again, nothing happens by chance. But he was literally stuck. He had tried everything that he could. This wasn't a person that was just waiting on the sidelines. He was legitimately trying everything he knew to do. And last but not least, the leper. Mark 1:40-44. And there came a leper to him, beseeching him, he was begging him, and kneeling down to him and saying unto him, If thou wilt, thou canst make me clean. And Jesus, moved with compassion, put forth his hand, and touched him, and saith unto him, I will, be thou clean. And as soon as he had spoken, immediately the leprosy departed from him, and he was cleansed. And he straightly charged him, and forthwith sent him away, and saith unto him, See thou say nothing to any man, but go thy way, show thyself to the priest, and offer a cleansing those things which Moses commanded for a testimony unto them. Notice his posture is different than most. He came to Jesus in a submitted, almost fearful position, a posture of unworthiness, and almost with an expectation of being turned away. This was a man that knew he was taking a risk. Leprosy came with a great deal of shame, isolation, and dehumanization from the society around them. Can you imagine that everywhere you go is either desolation, you're by yourself, or you're with just people like you? You're cut off from your family entirely without any hope of ever seeing them again. If you went into the city, now I want you to imagine this, you show up to Starbucks and everybody starts screaming and running everywhere. That's pleasant. Yeah. You show up to church or synagogue and you even get close and people just start flipping out, screaming, yelling. It's I can't imagine the trauma. Can you fathom how you feel about yourself? You already are tore up, right? You're a complete mess. Fingers are falling off, is that not bad enough that everyone just, they don't want to help. They're not trying to feed you. They're not trying to do anything. They want you just to go find someplace else to be. Yes, complete rejection. So I wondered why Jesus instructed him to go and show himself to the priest and give offerings for cleansings. Seems pointless if he's healed, right? But the Lord just dealt with me and said, to restore him back into society, to remove the shame, to allow him to fully transform, the leper had to go through this process, not just for tradition's sake, but for his sake. After such a long time in such a dire circumstance, he needed the priest to say, you can go home. Yeah. In our humanity, the temptation is to stay where we are, even after transformation. Even after receiving salvation or a word from the Lord or healing, we can easily stay where we are because it's what we know. Blindness, lameness, palsy, and leprosy were all life-changing, life-altering issues. Their entire world revolved around these circumstances. Some were born with these circumstances, and others had developed this later in life, seemingly out of their control. So the blind man reminds me of someone that's just born into unfortunate circumstances. Starting off life blind, especially during these times, would be considered a severe handicap. We don't have programs and different things that they could do to try and reintegrate them into society. There was no work, no future, and begging was the standard living. It was also assumed that his blindness was a result of generational sin. So there was definitely a societal judgment that was attached to his circumstances. And he had been surrounded by darkness his entire life. We know people like that. I think sometimes the Lord shows us these different situations to also show us people that come to God in a spiritual blindness. These can be representative of so many different things. Yeah. The man with the palsy seems like a man that fell on hard times. Circumstances completely beyond his control took over his body, and he went from independent to dependent. This does something to a person. To feel all of a sudden helpless, or worse, a burden to your family. Everything they had hoped to pursue or reach for in life seems completely gone. Now he was bound to a bed and without any hope of strength, and his self-worth was gone. We know somebody like this as well, where they've had, yes?
Palsy, he was paralyzed.
Well, they say it's actually kind of like what you see where the muscles stop working on one side. When I looked it up, I think there's different varieties of palsy, but this specific one, they were talking about like he was confined because he couldn't control certain muscles. And sometimes it was their arms, sometimes, yeah, it was a lot of different things. So, but it's always interesting that sometimes when people fall into these circumstances, it can be, they experience a lot of anger, right? They're very frustrated because they know what it was like before. And to feel helpless and worthless is very difficult to deal with no hope. Like, mind you, no hope. One thing that stood out to me that I've honestly never seen before is that the blind man, the man with the palsy, and the leper sought Jesus out for their healing. But the lame man didn't know anything about him. Jesus went to him. Jesus knew where he was. The pool of Bethesda was a place where only the sick were there. This wasn't a social engagement. This wasn't a club. It was just people like himself. There wasn't a lot of traffic or people visiting. It's actually an enclosed space. I looked it up last night, and they called it the pool of Bethesda because it had 5 porches where people just were there around the water. But it was enclosed. This wasn't a place where a whole lot of word of mouth was happening, right? This was the same people every day. So he went to the place of his suffering without waiting for him to come to him. We see people all the time in this place of life. They have tried everything they know how to change their life. They tried books, philosophies, trends, and it's extremely easy to judge them, but they don't know about him. And we know people like this. It's our job as the church to act as Jesus did and not wait on them to come to us, but for us to go to them. When you speak to them, they might not know what you're offering. They don't know that you're offering hope, peace, and salvation, and it may even sound like all they give you is excuses. But it could be they're trying to explain their circumstance. Yeah. You see, the lame man had no inkling of who Jesus was. No context for the conversation he was having with him. And Jesus didn't condemn him for making excuses, but instead, without hesitation, he offered wholeness. Many of us today would have been impatient and thought, he didn't want what we were offering. We forget that people all over the world have never heard this gospel. They are instead surrounded by the same kind of people day in and day out, hurting, sick, broken. And I say, God, help us to see them as you see them, with mercy, patience, and understanding. I always think sometimes we make judgments. He didn't even know Jesus' name. When the Pharisees asked him who healed him, he was like, oh, I found out when we went to the temple. He still didn't know anything about Jesus. And it's so easy to be like, well, he asked him if he wanted to be made whole, and he made a bunch of excuses. He was having a conversation about his circumstance, his situation. And I think sometimes whenever we approach people or someone's asking for help, it'd be really easy for us to get frustrated, not realizing they have no baseline understanding of what you're talking about. They've never seen any miracles. They may not know the first thing about the Bible. That's hard for us to imagine sometimes, but I think we need to have our eyes open that the unchurched, the completely ignorant of Jesus, they're going to come through these doors, or we're going to go to them, and we can't get frustrated and think, oh, well, they just don't want what I have. That's our humanity that thinks that. Because we get uncomfortable when people, we fear rejection just as much as other people do, right? In our humanity, we'll start cooking up all these ideas about, well, I just didn't explain it right, or I don't know how to do this, and they seem combative. Maybe not. It could be they're frustrated with their circumstance, and you're talking to them and not realize that you're sharing something they don't have any understanding for. So I want to talk a little bit more about the leper. While leprosy isn't something that happens often in the United States now, there are lifestyles that still ravage people in a very similar way. Drugs, alcohol, homelessness, prostitution, gambling, many, many more. And sometimes these are a direct result of them being born into a family with dysfunction and chaos. These situations carry with them a stigma that echoes very similarly to the stigma of leprosy. People keep their distance. People don't want them around their families, and they label them very easily. That's really hard to shed. It's hard to get rid of. This is someone that has been through trauma, where fear was common and hopelessness many times dictates their life. And we definitely know people like this. It would be easy to let fear dictate future actions when we come from situations like this. So I want to talk a little bit about different stigmas because, again, we may not realize what all's going on below the surface. So there's fear of rejection, fear of repulsion, or fear of exclusion. And, when the leper went to see the priest, this was his first opportunity to really understand how to get to where he wanted to be. He wanted to be with his family. He wanted to be with society. And I could see where the leper could still feel like, well, I can just still stay on the outskirts of town. I could just stay where I'm comfortable because I haven't been accepted, in 10 years or 20 years or my whole life. And Jesus wanted him to be whole, which means complete restoration, not just healed of his sickness.
Right.
Not just a physical healing, because he needed to show himself to the priest and make a sacrifice didn't mean that he was any less healed. Didn't mean that he was not less delivered. No, it was a process because he had been through so much. He needed a little bit more time and a little bit more personal attention before he went back to his family. So through this simple act of obedience, in each instant, he was empowering them. Jesus not only was healing them, but he was saying, don't stay here.
Right.
Don't stay where I left you. Not one time did he tell somebody something that wasn't encouraging them to get up from where you are and either come with me or go to your house, do something, because you can't stay right there. What would have happened if so many times someone goes through a transformation, they have no clue where to start, and Jesus has been like, all right, you're on your own. See you later. All right. No. Let's get moving. Let's go. You've got power now. You're empowered to take control. In Revelations 22:17, it says, "And the Spirit and the bride say, Come. And let him that heareth say, Come. And let him that is athirst come. And whosoever will, let him take the water of life freely." I say all of this to make it known as the bride of Christ. We must work with him to say, Come. Yeah. This isn't just a call to come to church. It's a call to accompany us. Come with us. Yeah. We must get them moving forward. This word comes means to move from where they are to draw closer to the voice that calls them. We can't leave them sitting on their bed, stranded on the street corner, or still wearing the labels of their past identity. We need them to know with this change, they now have the strength to change their surroundings, take back their life, and no longer be identified by their past. You see, remembering your past is very different than revisiting it. I had a friend that she was older than me, and she was a workout partner, and she had been married before, and she had gotten in church, and I mean, just a fantastic person. I can't say this enough. Super vibrant, but she had come from, when she got in church, I think she was in her 20s, and she'd come from, going to the clubs, unchurched completely, and she was just living her life. Well, I went over there. I was in college, so I might have been 19 or 20 at the time. And I remembered that one night she showed me some of her club clothes. Now, mind you, I'd never been in those circumstances or anything, and I didn't say anything, but all I could think is, why do you still have this? Literally didn't understand why she was hanging on to these. And she struggled for years, in and out, in and out. It wasn't until she stopped revisiting the past. See, I think she was trying those clothes on because she literally wanted to still prove to herself that I'm still pretty, and I'm so, it wasn't that she wanted to sin, understand, but she was holding on to the identity that she had back then because, like I said, she was super popular person, I think she's homecoming queen, super, I can't say enough about, this was a great person. This wasn't somebody that was just I'm just going to do what I want. I think there was a fight within herself because she kept revisiting her past, not remembering it, revisiting it. And I wonder sometimes if the struggle that happens within us to revisit. See, what would have happened if the lame man would have left his bed there? Hadn't picked it up. He'd have wanted to go back and get it at one point. And that's a place of depression and 38 years of bad memories. Do we need to go back there? Probably not. Probably not. So revisiting is very different than testifying or even remembering because we have a little bit of clarity. But has anybody ever been in a place where a song comes on or a smell and you remember a part of your life? And sometimes it's good, sometimes it's not good. Right? It's very keen, it happens to us all. And in that moment, you're glad that you don't have those same CDs still in your car, and you still don't have that kind of smell in your house, and you don't have those things that you're attached to because you can leave that place and realize, I'm not that same person that I was before. And so, Philippians 1:6, being confident in this very thing, that he that which hath begun a good work in you will perform it until the day of Jesus Christ. Once somebody is a new creature and a good work has begun, this is just the beginning. Have you ever seen a YouTube video or a clip of a newborn calf or a colt being born? And it's always pretty humorous because they try to get up and they're doing all this stumbling around business. I've even seen them sit down a few times and their mom keeps nudging them to get back up. You got to do this. And you almost feel kind of bad for him. Can he take a 15-minute break? He was just born, But the mom is getting him moving for various reasons. And of course they're going to stumble around. Of course they're going to even fall down. And you may even continue to see this happen once or twice. Maybe even happens over and over again. I've seen where, within a few days, the farmers out there and they're getting all tangled up in the They've never seen barbed wire. They don't know what it is, and they're like, I got stuck in here. That's common because when you're a new creature, you don't know any better. It's in this time of harvest, we must understand that our role as the church is to come alongside those that have been transformed and to build them up, to edify them. They may stumble around at first. That doesn't mean they haven't been delivered, restored, and set free. We can sometimes get confused and think somehow it didn't stick. That is not how this goes. When God starts a good work, but understanding to come alongside somebody, especially depending on what they've been through, they may need a little hand-holding. They may need a little bit more attention. If they've been through some trauma like a leper has, they're going to need a little bit more than, okay, go home now, right? Because there's a fear there. There's a stigma there. To edify means to build a house. And I always think it's so interesting. If we weren't, I'm still being worked on. But we forget that sometimes. He still has to be patient with me. Otherwise, why were all the epistles written? Why are we constantly getting our toes stepped on by Paul if it wasn't important for us to continue to build? So to edify means to build the house, and this takes time. And the direction must come from the architect, not from us. We don't get to choose how fast they go or alter the plans. We don't get to choose a shortcut or get frustrated or impatient. We must work in tandem with the Spirit as the bride to say, come, let's walk together. Yeah. Don't just follow after me. I want you right here. Because the problem that we face sometimes is when they come and they're transformed and they don't know what to do, we can easily just pat out, oh, we're so glad you're here. They need a little bit more than that. Mm-hmm. They need a little bit, they need to be, it's almost like you are tag teaming with them to get them, hey, we got to get them moving forward. Because if you just leave them there, they may almost convince themselves that this was an accident. Or they could convince themselves, well, I don't really know what else to do. I guess I keep begging. What would have happened if we go back to our old life because that's all does it mean that he could still see? Yep. But he didn't need to do that anymore. Transformation is scary for some people that have no background in this. And we want a harvest, but we have to be the ones that are ready and prepared to take those people in. We can't just say, oh, I want 1,000-soul revival, and then we're not willing to do any kind of work to come alongside people. Discipleship isn't sometimes what we think it is. It's literally saying, come alongside someone. It doesn't mean tell them what they're doing wrong, tell them how to live, do all those things. It's becoming a friend to them and realizing that could be me. How do I want to be treated? How do I want my kids to be treated? How would I thrive here if no one knows my name? If no one's checking on me, trying to find out if I'm okay? When I'm sick, that they say, hey, I'm praying with you. May sound small, but you can feel isolated whenever you've never seen before. Yeah. And you have people around you that have seen their whole life. Yep. It can feel really strange when you never walked on your own two legs and everybody else has, and they can't really, they can't empathize. But the Lord knew exactly what they needed to do in order to take control, take back that time. Mm-hmm. I don't know how much time I've taken. But I feel like sometimes we want this Americanized discipleship. We want it to happen fast, and we want them to just get on board. And we start to get frustrated with people and think, well, they're just not sold out. Give them a little bit of time. They've never done this before. And we forget that because we see so much promise and we see the encouragement, and they're excited. But their real life is waiting for them, and we have to make sure that we're coming alongside them. There are going to be Pharisees in their life that are going to say, oh, you don't need to do all that. Why are you carrying your bed at Sabbath? Why are you doing this? Why are you doing that? We have to be the voice that says, let's go, let's move. You're fine. Even if you take just a few steps and you fall down, it's going to be okay. We're going to get there. But I do think it's one of those where we have to get out of the mindset that if they follow this program, they're going to get to where they need to be. Someone may take longer than that. I've seen people that took 3 years, and then some people take 3 months, but you don't know where they come from. You don't know what damage has been done. And for wholeness to happen, are they delivered? Absolutely. I don't question that for a second. But I do feel like the church has more work to do with them to get them where they need to be. The Lord spent 3.5 years with his disciples. We don't want to spend 3 weeks on somebody sometimes. We get frustrated. Oh, well, they don't show up for Bible study or they don't do this. Look, we're flesh just like everyone else. I have to repent all the time and say, well, I'm frustrated with this or I'm frustrated with that. But I cannot lose sight of the fact that that person has worth. No matter how frustrated I am with them, we've seen it so many times where we go, where'd that person go? Well, shouldn't I know? If I'm coming alongside that person, I can't be responsible for everybody. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that everybody here is going to know everybody else's business. When you come alongside people, you are your brother's keeper. The Lord wants you to know where they are. You may need to show up at their house. A text may not be personal enough. You may need to go and find them on the job. That doesn't mean you go, where have you been? No. You need to be caring about the person, not just their church attendance.
Yeah, it's good.
Because if there's something really going on, they need to know that you care more about that than them being part of your Bible study. Care about the whole person. If you want wholeness for them, that's what you have to do.